Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome once more. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. Because we care for one another's safety, our congregation is gathering online during this long season of coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love. Arise, our souls.
Good morning. The universe has taken this weekend to remind us that Kendyl is a normal human being with connections and responsibilities outside of her serving as All Souls minister. Her lifelong best friend's husband suffered a critical health emergency on Friday morning. Mark and Kendyl have gone to Chicago to be there for her. And in true Kendyl fashion, she has taken this weekend to remind us that maybe she is a notch above normal human being, and managed to identify a solution for her unplanned absence from this Sunday worship service and put into motion while packing and getting on the road. In light of current news around fallout related to the January 6th insurrection, Kendyl has asked that we replay the service from that week as it is somewhat newly relevant given the recent prosecutions of insurrectionists. I was reminded earlier this week, our path isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. You continually come back to things you thought you understood and see deeper truths. I hope you are willing to watch the service again, looking at it from where you are today compared to 9 months ago. The YouTube chat will be live, so please feel free to comment on your understandings, new and old.
Good morning, and welcome to the online gathering of the All Souls community for January 10th, 2021. This has been a week like no other. Elated by Tuesday's elections, violated by Wednesday's violence, we gather together here to try and make sense of what has happened, to try and discern what may come next, what to prepare for, and how. It makes sense to be afraid. It makes sense to be anxious. It also makes sense to be relieved and hopeful. It makes sense to be angry and sad and uncertain. All the feelings are here. Let us embrace them and give them space in our reverence. May this hour be a time of sustenance, a return to groundedness, a time to find our center, to celebrate and to grieve, to draw strength from one another. The poet Maggie Smith says this: "Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child that is broken. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible. And for every kind stranger, there is one that would break you, though I keep this from my children. I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real dump chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful." We gather this morning with this deepest shared hope that the bones are good, that we can make this place beautiful. As we light our chalices, I invite you to cast your vision here, in the middle of this hardest moment, into the world as it is, a world whose fragility has been exposed once again. Cast your vision here at the turning of a new year, a turning full of promise and trouble. Into this day, offer again the vision you've tried to talk yourself down from, your wildest dream, your audacious claim, the beauty that whispers to you to follow and build and become. Here, stir up your steadfast hope, your resolute clarity of all that is still possible. Be generous with your dreaming and brave. All paths to the future are born of this courage of the imagination, this willingness to shed, to salvage, to start again. Let this growing light call us together to follow and build and become. I invite you to share where your chalice is lighted this morning. Now let's join together in speaking once again our covenant promises to this community. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss. For each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
I'd like to talk to the children who might be with us this morning for a little minute now. And I wonder if you remember ever having seen a rainbow, a big arch of colors up in the sky when you looked up. Usually it's after it's been raining. You know, a rainbow is not actually a thing. It's not an object you can hold on to. Rather, it's an effect. It's the way that light works when there is water hanging in the air. And you might ask either your science teachers or maybe your parents, someone has either a crystal or a prism of glass, and they might be able to show you how that happens when white light breaks up into all the different colors. We call that a spectrum, and it's almost feels kind of magical when it happens, when you see that. That's what a rainbow is. Ancient people often didn't really understand how rainbows happened, what made them. And so they told stories. They had lots of stories about rainbows. And one of those stories comes from the Jewish and Christian Bible. It says that God made the rainbow as a promise to people that floods would never cover and destroy the whole earth. And that's why you often see it after a rainstorm, because they say the story is that it's meant to make people feel safe, so that even when there's scary thunder and lightning, you remember the rainbow and you know that it's going to be okay. In our own time, some people use the rainbow as a symbol to represent something they believe in, to remind themselves and other people that they believe in. Because it has all the different colors in it, they say it represents all the different colors and kinds of people that there are in the world. And it means that each of us can be different from other people. We can be special and different, but we're still equal. We can have our differences. We can know that that makes each of us unique and special. But nobody is better and nobody is less important, because we are all needed to make the world, just like the rainbow needs all the colors, or it's not a real complete rainbow, right? So those are some of the things I'd like you to think about the next time you see a rainbow up in the sky. Let's say together the words of dedication for our offering. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Reading from Of Justice and the Conscience, an 1852 sermon by Theodore Parker. Look at the facts of the world. You see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. Things refuse to be mismanaged long. Jefferson trembled when he thought of slavery and remembered that God is just. Ere long, all America will tremble. We need a great and conscious development of the moral element in man and a corresponding expansion of justice in human affairs, an intentional application thereof to individual, domestic, social, ecclesiastical, and political life. In the old military civilization, that was not possible. In the present industrial civilization, it is not thought desirable by the mercantile chiefs of church and state. Hitherto, the actual function of government, so far as it has been controlled by the will of the rulers, has commonly been this: to foster the strong at the expense of the weak, to protect the capitalist and tax the laborer. The powerful have sought a monopoly of development and enjoyment, loving to eat their morsel alone. Accordingly, little respect is paid to absolute justice by the controlling statesmen of the Christian world. Not conscience and the right is appealed to, but prudence and the expedient for today. Justice is forgotten in looking at interest, and political morality neglected for political economy. Instead of national organization of the ideal right, we have only national housekeeping. Hence, the great evils of civilization at this day and the questions of humanity so long adjourned and put off that it seems they can only be settled with bloodshed. The thrones of Christian Europe tremble. A little touch and they fall. Capitalists are alarmed lest gold ill-got should find an equilibrium. Behind the question of royalty, nobility, slavery, relics of the old feudalism, there are other questions yet more radical, soon to be asked and answered.
Reading from a sermon delivered at the National Cathedral, Washington, D.C., on March the 31st, 1968, by Martin Luther King, Jr. I say to you that our goal is freedom, and I believe we are going to get there, because however much she strays away from it, the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be as a people, our destiny is tied up in the destiny of America. Before the Pilgrim Fathers landed at Plymouth, we were here. before Jefferson etched across the pages of history the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence, "We were here." For more than 2 centuries, our forebears labored here without wages in the most humiliating and oppressive conditions. And yet, out of a bottomless vitality, they continued to grow and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery couldn't stop us, the opposition that we now face will surely fail. We're going to win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of the Almighty God are embodied in our echoing demands. And so however dark it is, however deep the angry feelings are, and however violent explosions are, I can still sing, "We shall overcome." We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth, crushed to earth, will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. As we were singing earlier today, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet the scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God, within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair the stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. God grant that we will be participants in this newness and this magnificent development. If we will but do it, we will bring about a new day of justice and brotherhood and peace. And that day, the morning stars will sing together, and the children of God will shout for joy.
Gonna shine not one moment more. You know that God put a rainbow in the sky. It was dark outside. Executive orders were flying all over Washington. But God
I think I must have been about 14 when I lost my faith in moral order and political authority, both at the same moment, watching a movie. I'm pretty sure that Anne of a Thousand Days was shown to us in school in history class. And what I remember is the scene in which the court musician Mark Smeaton is accused of adultery with the queen. The way the question is posed by the king's officers, he must say either that he loves Anne, which confirms that he has been having sex with her, or that he does not love Anne, which means that he is disloyal to the crown. There is no appeal from this no-win dilemma to a more just authority because it is the king's doing in the first place. Perhaps I was later than some coming to this realization, but that was when the floor of my faith, that if you followed the rules and obeyed competent authority, you could always achieve a just outcome, fell out from under me. There was no compliance at any point in the sequence of events that could have saved Mark Smeaton. The world was, at least potentially at any moment, unjust. There were no guarantees that the forces of good would triumph, as I had always supposed there to be. I struggled to reconcile this insight with the relentlessly positive anthropology and historical narrative of my UU Sunday school upbringing. It was true, I was constantly reminded that each of us has work to do because perfect justice, ethical awareness, and peace had not yet been established. But the progressive Enlightenment assumption that we people of goodwill, intelligent, responsible, humanist people, were in the process of establishing it, and that it would be established in this world in the not very distant future, was not something that I knew how to question. This revelation would have taken place not long after the assassination of Martin Luther King and the ensuing riots. King's death itself fit seamlessly into the narrative of moral martyrdom in the service of the freedom of others that I knew well. I had attended the memorial service for Unitarian minister James Reeb, murdered in Selma, in the same spirit of honoring a sacred sacrifice and dedicating myself to the unfinished task. But the riots made no sense to my preteen ethical awareness, neither did the atrocities of Vietnam or the sullenly spiteful protests against the war. A lot would happen in the ensuing 7 years until I found myself in seminary graduate school, married to an Army veteran, studying the Transcendentalist Unitarian minister and social activist Theodore Parker. I admired Parker, not least because unlike other Transcendentalist heroes like Emerson, Thoreau, and Alcott, he was a competent pastor and a successful church leader. It was Parker who announced to his professional colleagues, as well as the world in general, that after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, he wrote his sermons with a primed and loaded pistol on his desk, prepared to defend any escaped slave or black member of his congregation who might appeal to him for help. He was also a wordsmith who coined not only the image of the arc of the moral universe, but also the phrase government of the people, by the people, for the people. I've been told that a volume of Parker's published sermons was among Lincoln's favored reading materials. So when Marilyn Carpenter asks about the statement that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, the first significant thing, I think, is to trace it back from Barack Obama's Oval Office rug to Martin Luther King's paraphrase in his speeches, to Lincoln's borrowing, to Parker's original statement. What he said, as we heard a few moments ago, is more precise but less catchy. It was this: I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience. But from what I see, I am sure that it bends towards justice. And let us be clear here that Parker is making a typically transcendentalist claim. It is not scientific proof that he is offering, but rather a conclusion that he divines, that is to say, discovers by guess through the perception of conscience. A second element of clarity is that he is basing this observation on a long historical extrapolation. My eye reaches but little ways, he points out. The arc is long, and none of us sees the whole thing because it extends far past any one human lifetime. From a more limited perspective, it might not look like an arc at all. Finally, we should be aware that this line, like much of the indignant prophecy of the Hebrew scriptures, was meant to be accusatory and unsettling to the hearers. It is later generations who have domesticated it to the point that we can find it reassuring. Parker is suggesting to the audience of his time that if it is true that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, they will ultimately stand condemned by it for being complicit in the grave collective wrong of slavery. His message is not everything will be okay in the end because the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. Rather, he is telling us, beware. The arc of the moral universe is going to expose your own cowardice and compromise with evil. It will not be okay for you in the end unless you get busy and correct the sins of your society now. He uses the rhetorical device of, hey, what do I know, to hedge his inflammatory bets. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve. But if he's right, he submits, we are not in the clear because of this. We are in deep trouble. Thomas Jefferson had understood this decades earlier when he wrote, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. More recently, Reverend Jeremiah Wright and other activist black pastors have understood it when they challenge the rote expression, God bless America. What would it mean for us, they ask, if God were to indeed bless America with a true vision of its underlying moral corruption? If God were to expose our systems of privilege and oppression, of wasteful wealth and wretched want? Perhaps we should not be so eager to summon God's authentic blessing. And perhaps it is not such great news to suggest that the arc of the moral universe bends towards a severe and righteous justice. It is helpful to keep these considerations in mind about what Parker intended to say when he sent this particularly durable meme out into the universe, as we ponder together with Marilyn the question of whether or not it is in any meaningful way true. A question which is of particular urgency in these fraught days, as we watch the soon-to-be ex-president of our nation discard all remnants of dignity, decency, and fidelity to his oath of office in the service of ego, greed, and privileged mob violence. It is now clearly demonstrated that this would-be dictator and all his followers and enablers are exactly as they were once described, deplorable. For the purpose of response to these events, I submit that there is actually no need to await the long arm of the moral universe. Rather, we need to insist that the legal universe and the political universe operate as they are structured in our own place and time. We need to endorse all efforts to remove Donald Trump from any form of power as quickly as that can be achieved. We must demand that legal consequences for the criminal behavior of those who invaded our Capitol last Wednesday be fully enforced through prosecution, and we need to support the removal of any members of Congress or other elected officials who supported or approved those actions, our own current Missouri senator among them, either through ejection by their colleagues or by repudiation by the voters at our next opportunity. We must also acknowledge the stark contrast between the restraint with which law enforcement personnel handled white insurrectionists committing violence and vandalism in the halls of Congress, with the aggressively harmful ways in which peaceful protesters, particularly those of color, were treated by police on the streets of D.C. and elsewhere last summer. I am not a lawyer, nor a constitutional scholar, nor yet a politician. I have no particular expertise to offer in these matters. What I am is a citizen with education in moral reflection and an aspiration towards spiritual maturity for myself and others. I know and believe the maxim that those who refuse to learn from history are condemned to repeat it, and I fervently hope that we as a people of faith and our nation as a whole may learn enough from these last 4 years and this past week to prevent us from repeating them, particularly under the influence of another would-be tyrant just a bit more intelligent, strategic, disciplined, or self-aware than this one. Democracy, as I understand it, is a spiritual practice, which calls us to live into 2 principles. 1, the least likely individual may have important wisdom to share and should have an opportunity to be heard. 2, each of us, no matter how wise and special we feel, could be wrong and owes a duty to the common good over our private preferences. Our faith tradition also lifts up the right of conscience and the privilege of conscientious dissent from popular injustice, but only in response to the doing of manifest harm, not merely to the discomfort of challenged privilege. If we are ultimately to hew a stone of hope out of the mountain of despair represented by this presidency, we must become leaders and teachers, friends and neighbors, and parents and fellow citizens who can help to build a new consensus around our national history and present responsibilities. We certainly cannot dust off our hands on January 21st and say, thank goodness, that's over. The Biden-Harris administration will be facing huge challenges and will need all the support we can give it toward a renewed civic responsibility. Which brings us back to Parker's claim about the arc of the moral universe seeming to bend toward justice. This observation is sometimes abridged to claim that the arc of the universe bends towards justice, which seems to me is an oversimplification to the point of being false. Here is what I take to be true on the basis of observation since that day of disillusionment back in the 9th grade. The arc of the material universe is long enough to unfold over the life and death of stars, but it bends toward entropy and death. All things are ultimately slowing down, cooling off, tending toward disorder and non-differentiation. The explosion of our sun, which supplies the input of energy that makes conscious life on our planet possible, will at some point in the barely imaginable future burn itself out. And that will be the end of life as we know it, unless we have by then colonized some other galaxy. Even in that event, universal heat death will arrive at some more distant but equally inexorable point. Our lofty intentions will not outrun the finitude of all composite things, as the Buddhists teach. I find no opportunity in this scenario for the triumph of anything meaningfully to be called justice. The arc of the living, evolving universe, the interconnected web, as we like to call it, is, I suspect, a somewhat different matter. It bends toward consciousness, toward what Whitehead once called increasing complexity and intensity of feeling. As evolution plays itself out in a kaleidoscope of diverse, shifting forms, the object appears to be an ever-increasing capacity for awareness and appreciation of all that is, including self-reflection. But the fact that genetic diversity arises out of a game of hereditary roulette, including the possibilities of fatal deformities as well as useful mutations, of overpopulation and crash as a result of species success, and the exploitation of other life forms as food sources and parasitic hosts, appears to be no obstacle to the process itself. The universe of life is even less arced toward justice than the universe of things, in that it appears to actively reward some forms of destructive exploitation just as much as it does mutually beneficial cooperation. For these reasons, it seems to me that to say the universe itself bends toward justice is simply either incorrect or incoherent. Justice is not a category applicable either to the mechanical operations of matter or to the evolutionary energies of life. If anything really does bend toward justice, it is the moral universe of Parker's original observation. And this, it should be recognized to begin with, is a universe that is created by and exists within human consciousness, which does not mean that it is unreal any more than language is unreal because it is an artifact of our human capacity for constructing meaning. In fact, I suspect that the moral universes that we inhabit are collective creations, social structures, and that we operate in multiple ones at the same time. There is, for example, the moral universe of the army, different, presumably, from the moral universe of the academy, or the frat house, or the law court, or the family. What constitutes justice in one community is held as wrong in another. And this is where I think that Parker is, like many of his contemporaries, open to criticism. That as a member of the dominant culture, white, male, educated, professional, he assumed that the moral universe he occupied represented an external God-given reality that existed equally for all people and to which everyone was equally accountable. Just as Jefferson asserted in the Declaration of Independence that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. This assurance was what gave Parker the standing in his own eyes to condemn his fellow Bostonians and New Englanders for their hesitance about slavery. In his moral universe, human chattel bondage was wrong, and when it was legally eliminated in the nation, those who agreed with him had cause to believe that the arc had indeed bent toward justice. My own guess is that justice is an invention of the collective human consciousness that essentially deals with the way humans function in relationship to each other. I suspect that our relationships with matter can be reasoned or ignorant, ugly or beautiful, grateful or resentful, but probably not unjust. I suspect that our relationships with other living beings can be compassionate or cruel, respectful or arrogant, destructive or sustainable, but probably not exactly unjust, unless we expand that word far beyond anything Parker meant. It is only in the realm of how we envision our relationships to other people that justice enters the equation, which is why the question of who or what counts as human remains ever urgent and evolving. I think the question is not whether the universe out there actually bends to our shared moral will, so much as it is, what kind of moral universe do we imagine together? It is only if we envision a world without slavery that we can call on each other to do the work of bringing that world about and experience that as the arc of history bending. It is only if we propose to ourselves a government of and by and for the people that the business of political leadership becomes a moral stage on which heroes and villains contend. If we imagine a moral universe in which God stands within the shadows, judging and keeping watch over his own, as the poet James Russell Lowell, also a Unitarian and contemporary of Parker's, wrote, then we can claim our own decisions as either a reflection or a rejection of that higher will. Just as rainbows exist not out in the tangible world, but in the interaction of water, light, and the nature of human eyesight. Just as the end of the rainbow is a place found in the legends of our collective imagination, so I'm pretty sure that the arc of the moral universe is a vision that we see together from time to time when conditions are right. And what constitutes the justice to which it bends is a moving target in human culture and history. Call it the pot of enchanted gold. Call it our heart's desire. Call it beloved community, right relationship, equity, compassion, the end of privilege, democracy, freedom, our shared vision of the common good. Without that imagined goal, there is no moral universe, no arc to bend, no work to make noble the lives we spend and hallow them with meaning. The arc bends in our hands whenever we care enough about something beyond ourselves to propose a better way of being human together here in this world. And yes, that happens. That happens for sure. You see it time after time. And it changes over the span of history. Lowell said that too in the same poem. New occasions teach new duties. Time makes ancient good uncouth. They must upward still and onward, who would keep abreast of truth. There will always be those who want to reach backwards to the endowments of old privileges and stolen power, who will contend that there is no rainbow arc, who will scorn the aspirations of justice and celebrate the uses of violence. The struggle with those forces is real, as it was when Parker coined the phrase, as it was when Lincoln borrowed it for a land at war, as it was when Barack Obama, America's first Black president, had it woven into the border of his Oval Office rug. It is real, as it was on Wednesday, as it is today, as it will be on January 20th and every day after that. There is real struggle. There is real loss and grief and pain, and there are no guarantees. You can't sit back and say, never mind, the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, you know. That's like spending the gold at the end of the rainbow before you ever find it. But look up from the flood and the mud and the efforts that so often feel futile. Look up, because just when it seems like the sun isn't going to shine anymore, there will be a rainbow in the sky like a promise, and you won't be the only one to see it. The only justice there is in this universe is the justice that we make. The only justice that has ever been achieved is the justice that someone imagined, and then other people imagined it with them, and then they got to work together and believed it into being. Can you imagine a world where no one dies freezing under a bridge? Where nobody stands in line for hours to vote and every vote counts? Where every child has food and every family has a home, and the police really do protect and serve everyone, no matter what color they are? Can you imagine a world where brown people and Black people and queer people and indigenous people and people who move or think differently are all free to be safe and generous and loved? If you can, then the arc of the moral universe is bending in your hands and in your life right now, and there is no time to lose. We have just seen the naked face of tyranny grin at us, and we who believe in freedom cannot rest.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest
until the killing of black men, black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. That which touches me most is that I had the chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we failed. And if I can but shed some light as they carry us through the gale, the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe
Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light to just shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. Struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way our struggle survives. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. Sometimes I can be quite difficult, bound to no man's word. Ah, we who believe in freedom cannot rest.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it rests.
How shall we bless one another in these times of tribulation? Adrienne Mary Brown reminds us that what we are seeing now does not necessarily mean that things are getting worse. These fissures in the moral universe of our nation have existed for long, even from before the beginning. They are now getting uncovered, where we can all see them without disguise and must reckon with them. May that reckoning, heartbreaking as it is, bend the arc of our world toward the highest justice we now know. May you and I and all our fellow citizens take courage and together imagine a beloved commonwealth of equity, mutuality, compassion, and peace.
The hours of religion, which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple of space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual words of love.
Thank you for joining us today. A few reminders before we go. We have a church chat immediately following today's service to discuss what kind of safety precautions and what kind of risk metrics are most important to our members. Please join us at the Community Connection link in the chat and on the website. The link is now to the right of the picture slideshow. Just look for the coffee cup as always. At this point, we still hope to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on Sunday, October 10th, with another outdoor, in-person service at All Souls, acknowledging the complex history of the land on which Kansas City was built by successively displaced tribal people, by formerly enslaved people of African descent, and by white settlers of European ancestry. If any of our members are carriers of Native American history, we would love to know who you are and how your own story connects to our collective history. Please let Reverend Gibbons know if you have something to share. And following that service, there will be an in-person church chat, also on the metrics important to you in order to reopen safely. And As we part, please keep Kendyl, Mark, and their friends in your thoughts.